What if I told you that a single 1% fee, something so small you probably wouldn't even notice it on a bank statement, could quietly steal over $150,000 from your retirement without you ever realizing it happened? That's not an exaggeration. That's simple, unavoidable math. And it's exactly why this might be one of the most important videos you watch about your money this year, even though nothing about it feels exciting or dramatic. We live in a world built around convenience. Order food without leaving your couch. Buy something with a single tap. Skip the ATM line for a small fee. Get same-day delivery for a small charge. Every single one of these conveniences seems harmless in the moment, sometimes even smart. But convenience, especially financial convenience, almost always comes with a hidden price tag. And that price tag compounds silently in the background of your life, year after year, until one day you look up and realize how much it actually cost you. Stay until the end of this video, because I'm going to show you exactly where these hidden costs are hiding in your own financial life right now, and how to spot them before they quietly drain your future. Let's start with the single biggest offender, the one that costs people more than almost anything else combined, and yet somehow remains almost completely invisible to most people: investment fees. When people think about the cost of investing, they usually imagine something dramatic, like losing money in a market crash. But the truth is, the fees you pay on your investments, often expressed as a small, seemingly insignificant percentage, tend to cost people far more over a lifetime than most market downturns ever do. Here's why this happens and why it's so easy to overlook. Imagine two people, both starting with $50,000 invested, both earning an average annual return of 8% before fees, and both leaving that money invested for 30 years. The first person invests through a low-cost index fund with an annual fee of just 0.1%. The second person invests through an actively managed fund with a seemingly reasonable annual fee of 1.5%. On paper, that difference, 0.1% versus 1.5%, feels almost too small to matter. It's just one number on a page, barely worth a second thought. But here's what actually happens over 30 years. The first person, paying that tiny 0.1% fee, ends up with somewhere around $480,000. The second person, paying that seemingly modest 1.5% fee, ends up with closer to $320,000. That's a gap of roughly $160,000 lost entirely to a fee difference that most people would describe as small or not a big deal if they saw it written down on a page. This is exactly the hidden cost of convenience, the convenience of not researching fees, the convenience of sticking with whatever fund your bank happened to recommend, the convenience of never asking the uncomfortable question, what am I actually paying for this? The reason this cost feels so invisible is simple. Fees are usually deducted automatically, quietly, behind the scenes, without ever showing up as a separate, obvious charge on your statement. You never see a bill labeled $4,800 in annual fees sitting in your inbox. Instead, that money simply never makes it into your account in the first place, silently subtracted before you ever see the number. Because you never actually watch this money leave, it never triggers the same emotional reaction that an obvious expense would. Losing money you never saw feels completely different from losing money you already had, even though the actual financial impact is identical, or often even worse over time. Now let's talk about another hidden cost of convenience, one that hits people in a completely different way. Subscription creep. We live in an era where almost everything has shifted toward a subscription model. Streaming services, software subscriptions, meal kits, subscription boxes, premium app features, cloud storage, fitness apps, the list goes on almost endlessly. Individually, each of these subscriptions feels small and reasonable. $9.99 here, $14.99 there, $4.99 for something else. None of them, on their own, feel like they're threatening your financial future in any meaningful way. But here's the trap. Subscriptions are specifically designed around convenience, meaning they're designed to be easy to start and easy to forget about. Nobody has to actively decide to keep paying for a subscription each month, the way they might have to actively decide to buy something in a store. The charge just happens automatically, quietly, month after month, whether you're actually using that service or not. This is exactly why so many people, if they actually sit down and audit every single subscription currently being charged to their accounts, are shocked to discover they're spending anywhere from $100 to $300 a month on services they barely use, or in some cases, completely forgot they even signed up for. Let's run the numbers on this one too, because the pattern is remarkably similar to the investment fee example. If someone is spending an extra $150 a month on subscriptions they don't genuinely need or use, that's $1,800 a year. If that same $1,800 had been invested instead, at that same historical 8% average annual return, over 30 years, it would grow to roughly $220,000. Not because that person suddenly became a brilliant investor, but simply because a small, easily overlooked convenience expense was redirected toward building wealth instead of silently draining it. The third hidden cost of convenience worth discussing is transaction and service fees, the ones that seem to multiply endlessly in modern financial life. ATM fees for using an out-of-network machine, overdraft fees for a small negative balance, late payment fees on a credit card, foreign transaction fees when traveling, convenience fees for paying a bill online instead of by mail. Each of these fees individually might only be a few dollars, sometimes even less than $10, which is exactly why they rarely trigger any real concern or reaction. But collectively, over the course of a year, these small fees can easily add up to several $100s, sometimes more, especially for people who aren't paying close attention to where and how they're spending money. The insidious part about these fees is that they're specifically structured around the psychology of convenience. Paying a $3 fee to avoid walking 2 extra blocks to an in-network ATM feels completely reasonable in the moment. Paying a $35 overdraft fee to avoid the minor inconvenience of checking your account balance feels like a fair trade in that specific instant of frustration or forgetfulness. But when you zoom out and look at the yearly and eventually lifetime total of these small convenience-driven decisions, the numbers become genuinely significant. Often significant enough to represent real, meaningful progress toward actual financial goals if redirected properly. There's a fifth hidden cost worth mentioning here too, one that's a little different from the others because it isn't a fee in the traditional sense, but it operates on exactly the same principle: the convenience of buy now, pay later services and minimum credit card payments. These options are marketed almost entirely around ease and comfort. Split a purchase into 4 easy payments. Just pay the minimum due this month. On the surface, these feel like helpful, flexible tools that give you breathing room. But underneath that convenience sits interest, sometimes at rates far higher than people realize, quietly accumulating on balances that never seem to fully disappear. Someone who consistently pays only the minimum on a credit card balance of a few $1,000s can end up paying back 2 or even 3 times the original amount over several years, purely because of how convenient it felt in the moment to avoid paying the full balance. This is perhaps the clearest example of how convenience and cost are almost always linked, even when the connection isn't obvious at the time the decision is being made. It's worth pausing here to notice a pattern running through every single example we've covered so far. In each case, the cost wasn't hidden because anyone was being deliberately deceptive, at least not in an obvious way. It was hidden because it was designed to feel small, automatic, and easy to ignore. That's precisely what makes convenience-based costs so much more dangerous than a single, large, obvious expense. A large expense triggers scrutiny. It makes you stop and think. A small, recurring, automatic cost slips past that same scrutiny almost every single time, which is exactly why these small costs are able to compound into such significant numbers over the years without ever being noticed along the way. So now that we understand exactly how these hidden costs work, let's talk about what you can actually do to identify and eliminate them from your own financial life, starting today. The first step is conducting a full fee audit of your investment accounts. Take some time to actually look up the expense ratios on any funds you currently hold, whether that's through a retirement account, a brokerage account, or any other investment vehicle. Compare these fees to low-cost index fund alternatives, which often charge a fraction of what many actively managed funds charge, for historically similar or even better long-term performance. If you discover you're paying significantly more than necessary, consider whether switching to a lower-cost alternative makes sense for your specific situation. The second step is conducting a genuine subscription audit, something most people avoid simply because it feels tedious and unglamorous. Go through your bank and credit card statements from the past 2 or 3 months and list out every single recurring charge you find. For each one, honestly ask yourself, am I actually using this regularly, and does it genuinely add value to my life? Cancel anything that doesn't pass this simple test. You might be surprised how many subscriptions you're paying for that you genuinely forgot even existed. The third step is becoming more deliberate about transaction and service fees. This might mean switching to a bank that doesn't charge ATM fees, or one that reimburses out-of-network fees. It might mean setting up account balance alerts to avoid accidental overdrafts. It might mean using a credit card without foreign transaction fees if you travel frequently. None of these individual changes feel dramatic on their own, but collectively, they can meaningfully reduce the quiet financial drain that convenience fees create over time. The fourth step, and this one requires a genuine mindset shift, is training yourself to ask a specific question before accepting any convenience-based cost. Is this convenience actually worth what it's costing me, both right now and over time? Sometimes the answer will genuinely be yes. Not every convenience fee is a mistake, and life isn't meant to be lived in a state of constant financial optimization at the expense of all comfort and ease. But asking this question consistently, rather than never asking it at all, is what separates people who unconsciously bleed money through convenience from people who make deliberate, informed choices about where their money actually goes. Here's the deeper lesson underneath everything we've discussed today. Wealth isn't just built through big, dramatic financial decisions, the kind that make headlines or feel impressive to talk about. It's also protected or quietly destroyed through countless small decisions that most people never think twice about. A 1% fee here, a forgotten subscription there, a convenience charge that felt reasonable in an isolated moment. None of these individual decisions feel significant on their own, which is exactly why they're so dangerous. They hide in plain sight, disguised as reasonable, harmless conveniences, while quietly compounding into tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a lifetime. The good news is that once you understand this pattern, once you know exactly where to look, these hidden costs become remarkably easy to identify and eliminate. This isn't about becoming obsessively frugal or eliminating every convenience from your life. It's simply about becoming aware enough to make deliberate choices instead of unconscious ones, and redirecting the money that would have quietly disappeared into fees towards something that actually builds your future instead. If this video opened your eyes to a hidden cost you didn't realize was affecting your own finances, hit that like button, share it with someone who might be paying for subscriptions they forgot about or fees they've never questioned, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next video, where we'll walk through exactly how to negotiate away many of these fees entirely. One last point before we wrap up. None of this means you need to eliminate every convenience from your life, or turn yourself into someone who obsesses over every small purchase. That approach usually backfires anyway, leading to burnout and eventually swinging back to careless spending out of sheer exhaustion. The goal here is awareness, not restriction. Once you know where these hidden costs typically hide, you can make a handful of targeted changes, review your investment fees once, cancel a few unused subscriptions, switch to a fee-free bank, and then simply let those changes work quietly in the background for years, the exact same way the fees themselves were quietly working against you before. Because at the end of the day, earning more money and building real wealth are two very different things. One requires skill in your profession. The other requires paying attention to the small, easy-to-ignore places where money quietly leaks away. See you in the next video. Until then, go check your statements and see what convenience has really been costing you.